Welcome, brave souls, to the chilling depths of horror in detail. Today, we're going to share Skinwalker encounter horror stories. First story, Camping Alone, Skinwalker story. As the last flames licked across the fire and faded, leaving a warm glow from the embers below, I drank the last warm swigs of tea from my canteen and thought about heading to sleep. The stack of firewood by my camp would remain unburned until the morning. My camp was a tarp tied up with paracord to the surrounding trees. It was basic, but lightweight and easy to carry on hikes. I had built a wall from fallen deadwood held between wooden stakes around the camp to deter any predators. I fumbled for the zip on my sleeping bag in the low light and eventually found it and unzipped it. I took off my boots and prepared to get in, very tired from the day of walking, and would cut into my camp. As I climbed in and closed my eyes, I heard a sudden noise from the treetops. It sounded as though every bird in the woods was flying away. A great flapping of wings and the odd squawk of warning prompted me to open my eyes. The embers from the fire were dull, now meaning that I couldn't see any of my surroundings. I've spent a lot of time in the woods and know that it would take a large predator to spook roosting birds enough to fly away en masse. I lay still and tried to listen, but I could hear nothing but the fading flaps of the birds' wings. They weren't nesting again, they were leaving the area. I heard the last of these noises and then nothing. The woods were silent, eerily silent. I don't know if you have ever spent a night in the woods, but for the first few times it is quite scary due to the various unexplained noises. Nocturnal animals prowling about, owls and rodents all make up the nighttime ambience of the woods. Over time, though, these sounds become comforting. There was nothing, no noise whatsoever. I sat up, still unable to see anything. I quietly reached over for a log to place on the embers. They were still hot enough and the log dry enough that they would catch. As my hand found a log and I began to lift it, I heard a branch snap nearby. I had made my camp in a clearing so as not to fall victim to loose tree branches falling in the wind, but all around me was dense, unkept forest. The only path or route that I had cut out to reach the clearing. The noise came from the path. I sat frozen, log in my hand, straining to listen. There came another crack of a branch. This did not sound like sticks breaking, but a large crack like a branch being trodden on. This has to be a large animal to make such a noise. I strained to see in the darkness, but the embers, while low, still inhibited my night vision. It was then that the smell hit me, an overpowering stench of decay. I gagged a little, trying to remain silent, not wanting to attract any attention to my camp. I then heard a shuffling. Whatever this creature was, it was taking the path I had cut. I heard it brushing against the leaves overhanging the trail, the rustling of the low-lying leaves of the trees. Whatever it was, the creature was big, at least 7 feet judging by the height of even the lowest trees. I noticed my breathing becoming heavier and tried to force myself to take controlled, quiet breaths. The smell of death in each breath was so thick I could taste it. That's when I saw the shadow, the unmistakable shape of a deer. I breathed a sigh of relief, feeling silly to have been so frightened by such a common woodland creature that I have encountered so many times before. It stopped moving and the silence returned. So silent it was almost deafening. It was then I noticed that I could only make out 2 legs, hind legs, but the shadow continued upwards. This deer was stood on its hind legs, its back stretched straight, its front legs and paws hung at its side. This was no deer. My mind suddenly went into overdrive. I consulted a mental image I had made of the area before the light had died, and it was surrounded by dense woodland. Impossible to run through at night without seriously injuring myself. The only way out was the path that the creature was stood on, still unmoving. I had not been hunting on this occasion and had not bought a gun with me. I was only camping for 2 days and so had enough food and drink with me. I had a large knife, but this thought did not fill me with much hope. I decided that I would scare it away with fire. I dropped the log I was holding into the pit of embers, pushing into them a little past the cooler embers at the top. I quickly placed several more around it and then hurriedly felt around the pitch-black floor for sticks. I found a few twigs and threw them on. One of the sticks caught, and a tiny flame shot up from the fire. While small, it illuminated the clearing enough for me to see the creature standing at my end of the path. I could not make out details, but I could see its shape and its antlered head, which was sniffing the air in my direction. The other twigs caught, and I saw it. It had the body of a deer, but its flesh hung from its bones. It looked as though it had been decomposing for a while, and yet here it was trying to get my scent. Its torso was upright, its broken ribs exposed through the rotting flesh of its chest. The head was the most disturbing. Much of its skull was showing, but its antlers had remained intact. Its head hung to its left side as if its neck was broken. Its eyes, or the space where its eyes had once been, reflected a bright red in the light of the fire. It looked as though there was something inside it wearing it like a costume. It opened its jaw, and head hanging to one side, it let out a scream. The noise was nothing like a deer, nothing like I have heard from any animal I have ever seen. I felt it all the way through me. A long undulating noise, high-pitched and shrill. My skin felt like ice, and I remember screaming run in my head. All care for the dangerous terrain surrounding me gone from my mind. I couldn't move. I was frozen, sitting in my camp, staring at the monstrosity before me. It took a step toward me when two of the logs caught fire, flames leaping up. The creature stopped and swung its head around to look at the fire, then back at me. It was at this point I thought I had a chance. The fire seemed to have scared it. I was wrong. It launched itself at me with amazing speed, probably only 20 feet away now. I finally found my ability to move and jumped up and sprinted in the other direction. I reached the tree lean, and without looking back, I jumped into it, holding my arms up in front of my face to shield my eyes from the many sticks and plants. I didn't make it far. I ran into a large branch and fell over. I wanted to look behind me, but I could not bring myself to. Instead, I scrabbled underneath the branch and started running again the other side. I hit 3 more branches in the darkness, and the last one hit me in the chest and winded me. I lay on the ground trying to catch my breath, thankful that I could no longer taste the awful taste of rotten deer flesh. I tried to breath quietly, trying to listen for sound around me. The woods were still quiet, but I could hear periodic crashes of a large creature, presumably searching for me in the darkness. The crashes were off in the wrong direction, though, and seemed to be getting further away, not closer. I lay in this spot for what felt like eternity, but was probably about 2 to 3 hours judging by the light. I finally heard a little forest critter scurrying through the undergrowth, then another, then an owl hoot. It was clear that the predator had left the area. I didn't go back to my stuff. I stood up and headed straight for the nearest edge of the woods. I picked up a large branch as a weapon and slowly picked my way through the woods. I reached the exit at what looked like around 4 a.m. The sun starting to rise again, but not yet visible. I walked over to my car. It was just as I had left it. I opened the door, and as I did, a smell of rotten flesh suddenly hit me. I slammed the door, started the engine, and drove out of there. My wheels span on the forest floor as I revved the car too hard. I didn't care. I just wanted to be away. I glanced in my rearview mirror, just as I was leaving the parking area, and saw it running across the middle of the car park behind me. Its running looked awkward, yet it was still so fast. I put my foot to the floor and didn't look back again. I don't go camping without my gun anymore, hunting or not. Second story, Skinwalker stories from the past. This is a story my family told me when I was growing up. We live in a rural community on the Navajo reservation. My aunt and her 2 brothers were home alone while my grandparents had left for the evening to attend a chapter house meeting. They were in the house, and like many people from the reservation, they didn't have electricity. It had been dark outside for about an hour, and my aunt and my uncles were getting ready for bed. Outside, they heard noises, as if someone moving things around outside. My oldest uncle went to look out the front window and saw a figure out by the truck. This was immensely out of the ordinary because the closest neighbor was miles away. Whatever it was opened the truck door and began to dig through the personal items that my family had left in the vehicle. My aunt and uncles were frightened by the sight and knew that they should take action. They took out the rifle and all steadied themselves to hold it up. They flung open the door and aimed the gun at the dark figure. The figure turned and started to walk towards them, totally unfazed by the weapon. My uncle pulled the trigger, but nothing happened. The figure drew closer, and my aunt began to smell something like a rotting corpse. It was so strong it made her gag. My uncle continued to pull the trigger with no luck, and the figure came closer and closer. Off to the distance, headlights were coming up the road. My grandparents were returning. The figure looked toward the lights and started to move away and tucked itself behind a tree near the house. My oldest uncle ran toward the truck with the gun. My grandfather got out of the car, and my uncle pointed to the tree. The thing was poking out its head to observe what they were doing. My grandfather ran into the house and over to the stove and grabbed a handful of ashes and rubbed over the gun and placed an ash-covered bullet into the chamber. He walked out onto the porch and fired toward the tree. Whatever that thing was didn't expect the gun to go off. The gunshot echoed, and the dark figure began running. My grandma chased my aunt inside, and my uncles and my grandfather went after it. There weren't many roads or paths, so as my grandfather and uncles chased after the figure, the truck was bouncing and the headlights were not fixed on one particular spot. My uncle swears that whenever the headlights would hit the figure, he saw a woman. Not only that, whoever, it was running on all fours like a bear. My grandfather eventually stopped the truck, and as they neared the ditch that drops about 20 feet, he got out and began to yell in Navajo. My uncle says that he was yelling about a local woman. He yelled that he wasn't scared and that he knew it was her and to leave his family alone. A few days passed, and there was news that the woman that my grandfather was yelling about had passed. I've always been told that if you know who the Skinwalker is, say their name, and it will kill them. Third story. My grandfather saw a Skinwalker. My grandfather told me a story once, as we sat around a campfire in his backyard, in the cool night of the Arizona desert. The horizon was clear, and each star twinkled in a purple sky, with a full fat moon hanging low over the mountains. His voice was raspy and gravelly, the result of a lifetime of smoking cigars and drinking whiskey. The fire danced and shined across his wide dark eyes as he settled into his seat, ready to tell his story. Way back when I was a boy, about your age, he began, I lived outside an Apache reservation with your great-grandfather. He had returned from a war and set about raising horses and cattle on 100-acre ranch settled between a brambly mountainside, with dirt good for growing thorn brush and not much else. One night, my mother was sick, and Pa and I took a trip into town about 50 miles away, straight through a dry desert, over a washed-out creek and some old abandoned farmsteads. The fire sparked, and a log cracked, jolting me out of the story. What next? I asked. Settle down, boy. You'll hear soon enough. Pa and I were driving in an old Ford pickup truck. I remember it was dark out, inky and thick, with only the lights of our old truck lighting up the road. I remember, too, when the engine began to sputter and the truck slowed to a jerky stop. God damn it, Pa said, guiding the Ford to the side of the road as it coasted to a halt. Stay here, son, as he stepped out into the darkness, shutting the door with a heavy thud. My window was down, and the cool desert air was breezy and felt good on my hot face and neck. Pa was getting water from the back to cool the engine, and that's when I smelled it. Rotten eggs. Strange, I thought, to smell sulfur in the desert. My nose also picked up carrion, like one of them dead, bloated cattle that would drop from the heat and lay there until the crows pecked enough holes in their hide to cause the whole thing to explode. It stunk and I gagged. My skin started to tingle too, the back of my neck felt itchy, and my face started to get hot. The wind stopped blowing and hung still and heavy, with the stink filling the cab. Pa, I called. Pa, PA. No answer. My heart started beating, and I felt such a fear in me, in my bones, in my chest, boy. I tell you, I never felt fear like this, not until Vietnam. not until I saw men dying around me. I locked the door and reached over for my pa door and saw a shadow bound across the road, through both dim beams of light, across the partly open domed hood. Grandfather paused. He spit a fat wad of tobacco spit off to his side, and he looked pensively into the darkness. I realized I was holding my breath and gasped for air. The night was cool, but I was sweating and clammy. Well, what happened? What about your father? What did you see? He sighed. A creature. He shook his head. You have to understand, there were legends, older than the rock cairns out in the valley, older still than Crazy Horse and Sitting Bull, than the old Indian chiefs and their shamans. The Apache and Hapa and Cherokee and all them old tribes of First Peoples, they told tales, old stories about dark Indian magic, a deal made with the old spirits of blood sacrifice to gain power, old power enough to fight each other and the Spaniards and later the white men that came for their land and women. They called them. He paused. Grandfather took a deep breath and bodied forward into his tale. Across the fire and the sky, the desert, the creek, the moon, the sun, and old mountains, he bodied forward. They called them skinwalkers, shape changers, old warriors resurrected as skinless men, all sinew and muscle, walking on deer legs with the torso of a man and the head of a coyote, but messed up, long and malformed snouts, teeth like a bowie knife, long arms and standing 7 foot, even hunched over. They'd gut the old cowboys and white riders. They'd run through bullets and sabers, part the Spanish armor like it was a potato sack. Wily, too, they could change their voice to match a person you knew or might know. Boy, that's what I saw. Big and fast, only for a second, it ran across the road. Gray and mottled, muscle flexing under its legs, hooves clomping on the road, stringy, muscled, hunched shoulders. And it turned, looked right into the cab, looked right into my eyes, and I swear it grinned at me. I sank into my seat, in shock, in fear, shaking. I knew death was near. The air was electric. I smelled ozone and brimstone. The air felt like right before the lightning comes and blows a tree to smithereens. Charged and full with power. I yelled for my pa, but no words came out, just a dry squeak. I was shaking as Grandfather told his story. He was still here, so I know he lived, but the supernatural always fascinated me. And even now, I felt the force of his words. The real power of skinwalkers was trickery. Sure, they could change their voices, but also their skin. That's why the gods took their hide. So they could take others. Not for long, the legends say. Maybe an hour before the soul of the skin they wore would come looking for their mortal shell before going to whatever hell awaited them. Though I think that getting skinned alive was hell enough. A minute passed in what felt like a lifetime, 1 second in 1,000 years. My father's door opened, and I jerked my head to the left, putting my fists up to fend off attack. "Son, it's me," my father said, before climbing into the cab. He grasped the steering wheel and pulled himself in awkwardly, jerking himself into the seat. I cringed into the corner. I looked at him. I looked hard. "Boy, your great-grandfather was a good man, treated me and my ma right. He fought the Nazis and saw the worst of man in Poland when he freed all them camps. And now I was taking his measure. Is this my father? Do I make a run or do I die? Is it him or not? Let's go get that medicine for your ma," as he pulled the truck into gear and pulled it out onto the road, and our trip resumed. I guess it was him after all. But how did you know? Was it because he said something about your mom? No, boy, I knew, because out the window, out the corner of my eye, I seen that beast running 50 miles an hour right next to the car, looking at me with them yellow eyes and grinning mouth. I looked and saw it, hunched and angry, running next to us, boy. My pa kept his eyes on the road, locked straight forward. "Son," he said, "don't look at it, don't look at it." That's how I knew, boy. Fourth story. I saw a skinwalker. It was a few years back during a road trip with my buddy Jake. We were cruising through the desert, chasing that feeling of freedom you only get on the open road. But little did we know, we were about to encounter something that would shatter that sense of freedom and leave us fighting for our lives. We were driving through Navajo territory, miles away from civilization, when we saw it, a figure standing by the side of the road, illuminated by the headlights of our car. At first, we thought it was just a trick of the light, but as we got closer, we realized it was something else entirely. It looked like a man, but there was something off about him. His eyes glowed in the darkness, and his limbs seemed too long, too twisted. And then, just as quickly as we saw him, he vanished into the desert night. We tried to shake it off, telling ourselves it was just our imaginations running wild. But as we continued down the road, things took a turn for the worse. We started hearing strange noises outside the car, scratching at the windows, whispers on the wind. Jake laughed it off, but I could tell he was nervous. I was too. And then, without warning, something slammed into the side of the car, sending us careening off the road and into the desert. The car flipped over, and everything went dark. When I came to, Jake was nowhere to be found. I stumbled out of the wreckage, calling out for him, but all I heard was the sound of my own voice echoing through the desert. I searched for hours, but there was no sign of him. That's when I saw it. The figure from before, standing on a nearby ridge, watching me with those glowing eyes. I knew then what we were dealing with: a Skinwalker, a creature of Navajo legend, able to take on the form of any animal or human it chooses. I didn't waste any time. I ran as fast as I could, the sound of my heart pounding in my ears. But no matter how far I ran, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was still out there, hunting me, waiting for the right moment to strike. It took me days to make it back to civilization, days filled with fear and paranoia. And when I finally reached help, I told them everything about the Skinwalker, about Jake, about the nightmare that had become my reality. But no one believed me. They said it was just a trick of the desert, a figment of my imagination. But I know the truth. I know what I saw that night, and I'll never forget it. The desert may be vast and empty, but it's also home to things that lurk in the shadows, things that are better left undisturbed. And if you ever find yourself driving through the desert at night, remember one thing: beware the Skinwalker, for it is always watching, always waiting, and it will stop at nothing to claim its prey. Fifth story, Skinwalker. I won't reveal who I am or much about where I live, and to be honest, it's been a few months since this happened. But I just came to terms with it now, and I have to warn people about what's out there, what they knew, what we don't. Warning: this is a very long read, and some of the content below is very disturbing. But I can't hold back. Here's my story. Occasionally, I like to go hiking with my friends. There's not much more to do, honestly. We live in a small mountain town in Colorado. It was fun at first, but by now we know the trails by heart. By the end of last summer, there was only one we hadn't tried. Now, there's a reason for that. The trail goes right through a portion of the forest that the Ute people considered sacred. I'll admit, I have hang-ups when it comes to these things. You don't wear hats in a church. You don't let the American flag touch the ground. You don't trudge all over somebody's sacred land for the fun of it. Still, my friend, we'll call him Mark, convinced me to go. He said that regardless of whether I went, he'd go anyway. And since no one else was going, he managed to goad me into going with him. That's another one of my hang-ups. Don't go hiking alone. Don't let friends go hiking alone. Too many tragic news stories start that way. So, I ended up going with him reluctantly. The whole way there, he was talking about how this was the coolest trail he'd ever been on. Yes, he had been there before, though only once. His manipulative ploy had been to get me to come with so he could show me. He admitted this all in the casual way that friends admit being asses to friends. Sometimes, I didn't blame him. I had a tendency to have a stick-up my butt, and what followed only reinforced it. We arrived at about 9, I remember, giving us plenty of time. It was farther away from town than most trails, and it wasn't near a paved road, so there was a lot of walking just to get there. No tourists knew about it. A lot of locals, and even some Ute didn't know about it. But if you followed a game trail through a bunch of trees, it would widen out and lead its way through some mountainous, densely forested terrain. What struck me was how quiet it was. This, apparently, was what Mark found so awesome. For some reason, in this particular place, you couldn't hear any birds chirping or any wildlife whatsoever. It was complete and utter silence. Eventually, I had to urinate. I stepped off of the main road just so Mark wouldn't see me. As I was going, I spotted something through the trees. It looked like some sort of clearing just past a shallow creek with a log going over it. My curiosity got the better of me as I looked at the log. It didn't seem to be an act of nature. It was a makeshift bridge, I was sure. True enough, when I tested it, it seemed to be stable. I put one foot in front of the other and crossed. When I reached the other end, I pulled my way through some trees and saw the first image of the day that I will never forget, though to many, it wouldn't have seemed like much. In front of me, there was vegetation, trees, ferns, and brush, but suddenly it all stopped. Within a perfect circle, surrounded by small, perfectly arranged rocks, there was nothing but smooth dirt. It was strange, not in the least because the shape of the rocks was absolutely perfect. They were partially submerged in the soil and fit together like bricks. Every single one of them was the same uniform white color, and as I got closer I saw things had been carved on them, symbols. They were old, very old. Even if I had understood them, their distinct shapes had been lost over the years. That was strange, but what disturbed me was that this circle wasn't actually perfect. On one edge, just one, a group of rocks had been kicked up. They were scattered around, as if they actually had been a perfect brick wall, and something had shattered them. In this area, the otherwise perfectly smooth dirt had been kicked up. There was something about it that just unsettled me. As quiet as the entire forest was, it felt quieter here. I quickly turned around and went back to Mark, who made some lane number 2 joke. I should have forced him to leave right there. Instead, though, we kept going. After all, the day was only halfway over. While the forest itself was cool, at least from Mark's perspective, I found the trail to be rather disappointing. It just went on and on. There were no alternate paths, and there was hardly any challenging terrain. For Colorado, this whole area was so flat. It was hardly a hike at all. The trail was just long, very long. It took us until noon to reach the end, and there was no one else on it. I know that it was a hard trail to find, and many of the other locals might share my sentiments, but we were there all day, and we didn't run into anyone. Of course, it wasn't until we reached the end that things started getting really weird. The trail didn't loop at all, and I inwardly groaned knowing that we'd be walking these 3 same boring hours back. We took our time eating lunch. As we did, I could swear I heard noises for the first time. There were animals moving through the forest nearby. We could hear the rustling of the brush. I looked and saw through the foliage the vague outline of a single buck's head moving past us. It was odd, but I dismissed it. We packed up what was left of our lunches and started the trek back. Every once in a while, I would hear the rustling again. I'd look into the trees, and oftentimes I would see the buck's head. Eventually, though, I noticed that it was making far too much noise and was doing so far too frequently. I told Mark to slow down and stop, and being Mark, he cracked a joke about it. But finally, he went silent, and we both still heard the rustling. Now, even Mark was a little freaked out. He turned back and saw the vaguest outline of the buck's head again. This time, to me, there seemed to be something wrong. The head was far too high up, around the higher branches of the trees. I noticed it. Mark didn't. I should have said something. But I didn't have time. Just as soon as it was there, it was gone again, going off further into the forest. I remember Mark talking about how deer were annoying as hell, about how he was going to scare it off, or something. I don't remember exactly what he said, and that bothers me, because I should remember. He was one of my best friends. I do remember him yelling at it, and at the time, it was funny. Hey, Buck. Yeah, you. Horny motherfucker, leave us alone. He walked off the road and disappeared down a ridge behind a layer of trees, pursuing it. For a minute, there was silence. That minute became 2. Mark, I called out. No answer. 5 minutes passed. I climbed down the ridge after him. Mark? I followed the general direction he had gone in, keeping the way back to the road in mind. I wouldn't go far, I knew, because he was smart enough not to go far. He hadn't. After a short time, I found a place where there were signs of struggle. In addition, there was blood. There was a lot of blood. It was all over the trees and the ground. I cursed myself. There were other things, too, in addition to the blood. Pieces of flesh that I didn't like to look at. There were marks showing that something had been dragged away from here. "Mark!" I called out furiously now. Forgetting the trail for a second, I ran forward along the drag marks. After running too far to be safe, I reached a small ravine with a creek running through it. I narrowly stopped myself. It wasn't a long drop, but it had hurt you, and a sprained ankle in the middle of the forest was bad news. The trail stopped here. "Mark!" I murmured, then called out again. "Mark!" Something heard, but it wasn't Mark. Across the ravine from me, I heard a rustling and saw the trees stirring. Something stepped through the foliage and revealed itself. This was the second image burned into my mind. Please give me a second. I've spent every day for the past few months trying to tell myself this wasn't real. At first, I saw a head, the head of a buck, but it came forward, and I realized that it was 7 feet above the ground. I was staring a 7-foot creature straight in the face that had a massive buck's head, but a humanoid body. The creature snorted. Its buck face remained neutral, scared-looking, even as if it wasn't sure of the malicious whims of the body beneath it. There was blood dripping from its horns, which were not at all like the horns of the average buck, but jagged, pointed, and unorganized. A mess of sharp, bloody points. Its human body was dark-skinned and naked, with very human genitalia. Its penis was dripping blood, just like its horns, implying things that I don't want to think of. I remember both its arms and its legs. They started human, but near the bottom, they started distorting and became animalistic. At the ends of its legs were powerful hooves. At the ends of its arms were hands with long claws, every bit as jagged as the horns on its head. In one of those claws, Mark's body was being held by his shirt. I examined him only briefly, just long enough to notice that the shape of his head was not what it had once been. For a moment, there was silence. I didn't scream. I couldn't believe what was in front of me. Then, the creature's ears ruffled. It dropped Mark's body apathetically and started backing up. Its deer head hung lazily to the side as it moved. My brain rang, suddenly. It's going to jump the gap. It's coming for me. With the logical side of my mind shut off, I turned around and ran, hopefully in the exact opposite direction of the way I came. Behind me, I heard a powerful grunt and then a scuffle of the monster landing on the bank. There was a horrifying roar, something that sounded like a buck and a grizzly bear shouting together. I had never run so fast or so desperately in all my life, but it was gaining on me. As I ran through the forest, I started to feel its warm, hungry breath on my back. Its hands were extending, and I swear I could feel one of its claws scratch me. I ran and scurried up the bank leading to the path. I don't know how I got there without it grabbing me, but I did. Then I took off down the road, hoping that I was going the right direction. While running, I threw off my backpack and gained some speed. I think the bank delayed it slightly. That's the only reason I can account as to how I may have gotten ahead of it. Somehow, I ran and ran and ran. I didn't stop. Eventually, I didn't hear it anymore, but I didn't care. I kept running. I had never been a long-distance runner, but my adrenaline was not going to wear off anytime soon, and I intended to take advantage of it. When I reached the end of the trail and saw the road again, I couldn't believe it. I got into my car. Just before I took off, I shot a glance back up at the trail, at the point where it went up between 2 mountains and was visible from the road. I would regret it. Standing there, near the beginning of the trail, was the Skinwalker, as I've come to call it. It had given up its chase, but it stood there, watching me hungrily, waiting to see if I would come back. Its deer head hung lazily and dead to the side. The blood on its body was beginning to dry. It had run the whole trail, and it didn't look tired at all. I twisted the ignition, floored the car, and never came back. They never found Mark, and I would never explain what happened. No one would believe me, though I needed to tell someone, which is why I'm posting it here. It came back to me in dreams, nightmares. That creature, the Skinwalker. Somehow, I doubt that forest was really sacred. In fact, I'm sure it was the opposite. Because the image that flashes through my mind most often is not the horrific creature. It isn't Mark's raped and mutilated corpse. It's that circle, which must have been maintained over the years by those who knew, those who understood. That old circle left alone for so long that had been quietly penetrated. Sixth story. There's a Skinwalker lurking in the Jemez Mountains of New Mexico. I'm a former resident of Albuquerque, New Mexico. I love it here. We have jaw-dropping sunsets along with our world-famous question, red or green? But there was one specific occurrence that makes me sick to my stomach that happened to have taken place only 2 hours from my humble city. It was early 2015. My father, my sister, and I all decided to go camping in the Jemez Mountains one last time before school started. We own a camper, and we use it every time we go camping. So we hit the road in the early afternoon, and we arrived at the campsite in the late afternoon. We have a great spot that is about a quarter-mile off from the campgrounds. There's at least 1 or 2 people camping within a mile radius from our spot, so it's always nice and quiet. For some context, our spot is cornered by 2 semi-hills, and then there's a trail that leads to the main road. Father has told me that cattle and wildlife pass along that dense trail at night. Just another pro to camping in the Jemez. The sun started to set, so we made a campfire just behind the trail. After about 4 s'mores, me and my sister decide to hit the hay. My dad, being a firefighter, knows that you should never leave a campfire unattended, so he decides to stay out just a little bit longer before putting it out. It's around 9 p.m., and I'm falling asleep until suddenly I heard my father scream from outside. I was then relieved when he chuckled and started to curse. He then came inside and told us what all the commotion was about. He said while he was watching the fire, he felt breathing on his neck. He almost pissed himself, he said. He thought there was a bear behind him. He then slowly looked behind him only to see a moose. He cursed and laughed because a damn moose made him scream. We all started laughing and pushed the event aside. I woke up about an hour later to the bright glow of flames. Oh shit, Father didn't put out the fire, I thought to myself. I opened the blinds only to see 2 bright as hell eyes peering from the trail. They look like a dog's eyes when you shine a flashlight on them, but only 10x brighter. I let out a curse and fell back to sleep. It was too late for that shit. I woke up the next day to the smell of bacon and eggs. I was still wondering about what my father said the night before. Something just seemed really off about it. Then I realized what was so off about what my father said. It hit me like a brick. I spoke with a stutter, Dad. Moose don't live in New Mexico. He looked at me with a confused look, and then his face went stone cold. Tell your sister we're leaving in an hour. Pack all of your stuff up. We left about 45 minutes later. I knew my dad is a skeptic. He believes in the everything is connected kind of spirituality. Whenever we talk about ghosts or scary stories, he always says something along the lines of, someone could have easily made that up. But the way he reacted to his realization of seeing a moose in New Mexico validated that he wasn't looking for a logical explanation. He wanted to get the hell out of there to protect us. I couldn't relate this experience to other scary stories until I heard of the so-called skinwalkers. I can confirm that what my dad saw that night was a skinwalker. It checked out in every category of what they look like and how they behave. The eyes of a skinwalker are brighter than LED lights. They could take the form of a coyote, deer, sheep, human, you name it. Now, of course, the logical explanation was that he saw an elk, not a moose. But when I pushed my dad to tell about what he saw, he swears to God that he saw a moose, because moose have elongated snouts that most elks lack. I needed to get this weight off of my chest. So, if anybody can relate or develop a logical explanation for what me and my father saw, I am open to what you guys have to offer. And yes, we have gone back almost 7 times for the past 2 years, and we never saw it again. 7th story. Did I meet a skinwalker in New Mexico? A year or so ago, I left England for the summer in order to travel a bit and maybe find some work abroad for a few months. I managed to stumble across a decently paying job as a farmhand in the northwestern area of the Navajo Nation Reservation in New Mexico. The farmer was looking for somebody to help him with busy work over the summer and allowed me to sleep in what I can only describe as a cabin, basically a big shed he had renovated in order to house whoever he had working for him at that moment in time. It was a large farmland, and the shed was situated pretty much parallel to the house across the largest field of crops. Living in this shed with me was a half-Native American boy who was about the same age as me. Name's Ahiga. Apologies if I misspell. It's been a while since I've wrote or spoke his name. Anyway, I arrived at the cabin after a long and stressful journey by plane and then pretty much hitchhiking my way across the USA. I met the farmer and the boy, and they both seemed friendly enough. Everything was smooth sailing for around 2 weeks, even with the relentless heat beating down on my pale English skin. Ahiga and I became close as we were around each other 24/7. He would always tell me interesting stories of Navajo legend. He often told me of the Yinald-Lushi Skinwalkers in detail, and he seemed very knowledgeable on the subject. He told me how he dreamed of these creatures often. It seemed like he had some kind of morbid obsession with these things. I chalked it all up to horror stories and didn't really put any stock into what he was saying, although it did interest me. I've never been one to believe in or fear the supernatural. One evening after a heavy day of work, I headed back to the cabin to shower and change. I got back to the cabin, showered, got changed, and sat down on my bed. There was no sign of Ahiga yet, which was weird because he would usually be back by now. I waved it off and left my cabin to head into the nearest town, if you were just to explore a bit more of the land I was staying in. I explored for a while and found a nearby bar to drink in, as I hadn't had a single drink since moving here. I left the bar at around 10:30 p.m., and it was pretty much fully dark. I began to walk back to the farm. As I walked back along the windy road, I felt as if I was being watched. I walked on a bit faster and made my way across to the farm. As I walked around the farmer's house, I noticed what looked like someone carrying a bag under their arm. Leaving my cabin, something felt and looked not right about this figure and its movements. I went stealth mode almost instinctively and took the long way around the field, hiding behind the fencing. I managed to get a good angle on the figure. As he stood up, the light shining from with the cabin illuminated, and I saw that it was Ahiga. At first I was relieved, but then I saw how erratically he was moving, almost with no rhythm at all. Under his arm, he clutched a dog's severed head. I felt sick to my stomach and ducked down, but managed to compose myself. I poked my head up to check once more, and he was heading off into the forest. I took this opportunity to dart for the cabin and pull my keys out to unlock the door. As I got close, I tripped and dropped my keys and thundered to the ground. I propelled myself back up and turned to see why I fell and saw I had tripped over the rest of the beheaded dog. I swung around to look towards the woods and saw Ahiga on all fours, not like an animal, but like a person with their arms and legs bent in the wrong direction. It felt as if he was looking directly into my soul. He had 2 yellow, glowing eyes and a confused look on his crooked face. "I am Ahiga," I think he tried to say, but the words were guttural and frothy, almost like Gollum from Lord of the Rings. I unlocked the door and bolted inside, locking it behind me and closing all the curtains and windows in the cabin. I sat awake all night, hearing noises and feeling watched somehow. I'd hear whatever it was at the door now and again, pretending to be Ahiga. It would repeat parts of the stories Ahiga he'd been telling me whenever we relaxed in the cabin together on previous nights, and every time it showed up, a horrific smell filled the cabin and made me vomit a few times. In the end, the harassment stopped and daylight began to shine through the curtains. I checked out the window and saw nothing outside. I quickly gathered all my possessions and got out of there. I flew back to England the next week after using all my farmhand money to rent a hotel room on the East Coast as far away from the place as I could. I often wonder what happened to Ahiga, but I'm glad I didn't wait around to find out. Many of you won't believe this story, but I can assure you it's 100% true, and I still think about it night to this day. I'm still not sure what I saw, but sometimes I still feel as if I'm being watched. But I think this may be paranoia. There's no stories of these things following you across the pond? Is there? Eighth story. I think my wife is a skinwalker. My wife and I just recently welcomed my sweet daughter into this world. But I got a bad feeling she may not be as sweet as she seems to be to me. But to understand why I'd say that about my own daughter, I need to give a little backstory to the situation. We haven't been married very long, as it's not really frowned upon to marry soon in my family. But when we were first dating and staying with my parents, we slept in their living room, and when we woke up one morning, I noticed the door was still unlocked, but I was always sure to keep it locked. I never really noticed anything else, though. I never saw any handprints on the door or windows. I never saw anything out of the ordinary at all that would be a telltale sign of an intruder. I brought it up to my dad, so he took me to his office to check the CCTV monitor. No one had approached the house all night. In fact, everything was eerily still except for a very large cat that would always hang out in their yard. That cat had been around for a long time, though. We always thought maybe it was a neighbor's cat because we lived out in the backcountry of Texas and there were other people out in the woods. But growing up there, I did actually notice a lot of things that scared the shit out of me. I once saw my cat, Salem, shape-shifting right in front of my eyes when my little cousin and I were playing soldiers near the woods. One of the old men down the road would tell us stories of a panther that would kill people's horses, but I wondered if it was really my shape-shifting cat or something. My dad also told me a story of a man that lived on our land before we did that killed his daughter's bus driver for what she said he did to her one day when she came home crying. And he would see the ghost of that dad standing over him when he slept with a blood-stained shirt and evil radiating from his eyes. And, of course, countless other stories of all sorts of things that go bump in the night. None of that really seemed related to that night. I noticed the door was unlocked. However, since then, I've noticed a lot of things are different about her than she used to be. But nothing too extreme, just minor things that only people really close to her would know. Like she started wearing makeup when she never really liked it before. And what she liked to eat changed. But I didn't really know how to explain it. I had only known her a few months and only had to ask what she liked to eat so few times for dates and family gatherings. Every time I tried to talk to her about it, or ask her if something was wrong, she shot it down. So I just had to deal with the fact that maybe I was just discovering her for who she really is. I got used it. It wasn't a big deal after all. Like I said, it wasn't anything major, and she still seemed like the girl I loved, and like I said, we had only been dating for a few months at the time. She started calling me Delicious, which wasn't really a pet name we had used before. I tried to ignore how uncomfortable her tone was when she used it. It was probably just sexual anyway. More recently, I've noticed odd smells originating from under our house when I'm out working around the yard. I've also noticed a greater number of flies and carrion birds. I was hoping a lost dog or some large rodent had just crawled under there and died. But one day, I found the promised ring I had given her that she said she lost before we even moved to this house. It looked extremely old now and caked with mud. I started nosing under the house near where the ring was laying, and I found a large indentation on the earth, as if something was laying there, but had been moved. Soon after that day, she surprised me with the news that we were going to be parents, and I've been so excited at first until I realized something. I just knew my initial suspicions were proven true when she got pregnant. You see, my wife warned me right away not to expect children because of an accident she had when she was small. She was infertile. Ninth story. I think I encountered a skinwalker. I have no evidence, but I promise you all this story is real. Sorry for the wall of text. I've always been a bit of a skeptic, ever since I was a kid. Scary stories don't faze me. Horror games never frighten me. And whenever I hear something weird at night, I instantly assume it's something normal. An animal, or just the house settling. Despite this, something very unsettling happened to me the other day, and I'm really not sure what to make of it. I think it's the first time in years I've been genuinely frightened. I live in a forested area in the U.S. Me and my girlfriend live in a large cabin, and although there are roads nearby, our nearest neighbors are at least a kilometer away. We also have 2 cats, one of which sleeps in the bedroom with us, whilst the other often goes out at night and does whatever cats do when they're out of sight. Anyway, I like to stay up late at night and sleep late into the morning, whereas my girlfriend's an early bird. It was about 1 in the morning, and I was watching crappy TV in the living room whilst my girlfriend slept in the bedroom. I was beginning to grow tired when I heard something outside near the cat flap. For clarity, our cat flap uses an electronic chip, so only our cats can use it. I assumed it was just one of the cats coming into or leaving the house, and I ignored it. Then I heard it again. It sounded like something thudding against the flat. It happened several times at random intervals until I lost my patience and decided to just go and open the door. Clearly the cat was having trouble getting in. I never thought about it at the time, but this was weird because we feed our cats well, and they're very lean rather than chubby. I passed the bedroom and peered in as I walked past to see if my girlfriend heard the noises. She was fast asleep, but the cat that sleeps with us was staring at the window. I called her name. Nothing. She kept staring. I shrugged it off and kept heading towards the kitchen. The back doors are through there, by the way. Anyway, so I reached the back door and saw a dark shape through the translucent flap. I sighed, expecting the cat to be out there, and opened the door. It took me a moment to open the door, and I saw the cat tense up as I opened the door. The door opened fully. I froze. It wasn't my cat. Whatever it was had started moving before I opened up, and I only caught a glimpse of a distorted figure, kind of like a tailless dog, bolting, and I mean absolutely pelting it. I freaked out and slammed the door shut. What the hell was it? I wasn't sure. My natural skepticism kicked in, and I assumed it was just my other cat, and I had merely startled it. Perhaps the darkness had made it appear larger. Nevertheless, I was creeped out and decided to go to sleep. As I slipped into bed, I realized something horrifying. The second cat was asleep on the rug. It took a while to get to sleep that night. Everything seemed normal until a few hours later. I awoke to a strange feeling of dread. Something wasn't right. My girlfriend was fast asleep. I held my breath and heard something creaking by the door. It sounded too loud to be one of the cats. It was as if a person was walking about. I reached towards my bedside cabinet and flicked on a lamp. The room was illuminated, and I saw something standing just outside the open door, staring at me. The same twisted figure I had spotted outside earlier. It wasn't very tall, maybe a little over 5 feet, but it was its face that scared me the most. I only caught a glimpse of it, but what I saw will stay with me forever. It looked like a dog, but with an elongated face and almost human-like eyes. You know that weird distorted snarl hounds pull when they're pissed off? It had that expression. I instantly started yelling profanities as I scrabbled backwards, trying to straighten up. The creature turned and sprinted down the hall. I heard it dash outside and go past the window behind us, just above the headboard. I managed to look out as my girlfriend started to panic as she woke up fully. We both caught a glimpse of whatever the hell this thing was as it dashed off into the woods near our home. Grabbing my trusty shotgun from beneath the bed, as well as a couple rounds from the ammunition box that sits next to it, I ran out of the room in my underwear and rounded into the kitchen. The door was open. I'd forgotten to lock it when I saw the thing originally. I haven't seen it since, and we still live in our cabin, but I've bought sturdy locks for all of the main doors and windows in the house, and always check the exit points at night. I also go to bed a bit earlier than I used to, so I'm asleep when the freaks of the night start to wake up. I've read a bunch of forums, and the only thing I can compare it to, based on what I saw, is a skinwalker. If you know anything about these things, please let me know. 10th story. Don't visit the Appalachians. I don't like to use the term skinwalker to describe the hellspawn that wander the Appalachian Mountains. I say this because the only people that believe in skinwalkers are the ones who have actually seen them. I sure as hell didn't believe in any such thing until about 2 weeks ago. The Appalachian Mountains had always been a place that I wanted to visit. The pictures on Google were enough for me. The place is beautiful. I had heard a few stories about skinwalkers roaming around the mountains during the night, which just made it all the more interesting. So I saved up some money, rented a cabin, and flew out here to experience the mountain lifestyle for a couple of weeks. The first few days were completely normal. I had gotten settled in and felt completely fine. Hiking some surrounding trails is all that I can recall for the first 3 or 4 days. It was on that 5th day that everything began going to shit. The cabin that I had rented had 2 big floodlights facing the backyard. Every night a coyote would walk past my cabin, causing the lights to turn on. I thought nothing of it. It was honestly kind of cute. On the 5th night of my stay, I was sitting in the living room watching some satellite TV. In the corner of my eye, I saw the floodlights flick on. I jumped up to go see my new coyote friend through the window. Let's just say that whatever caused my floodlights to turn on that night was not a coyote. Its body looked completely normal except for the legs. The legs were extremely long and skinny, probably 3 times longer than any normal coyote. The thing just stared at me. My fight or flight didn't kick in. All I could do was stare back into its empty eyes. This creature then let out the loudest, most blood-curdling scream I've ever heard, then got even closer to the window. I turned around to grab my phone so I could call the police. As I was walking to the couch, the floodlights turned off. The soft glow of the old TV screen was the only thing lighting the living room. I grabbed my phone and sprinted upstairs to my room. My first instinct was to hide in the closet, so I did just that. The closet doors had little slits in them, so I could kind of see what was going on outside. I picked up my phone and tried to call the police. There was one slight problem, though. My phone was dead. It was around this point that I heard knocking coming from my front door. The knocking continued for what felt like an hour. I literally had no idea what to do, so I just sat there, hoping that it would stop. It eventually did stop, but shortly after, I heard the door open. No kicking the door in or anything, it just opened. I started to cry. I could hear faint footsteps getting louder and faster as it went up the stairs. It eventually got to my room, where I thought I was dead for sure. I could hear it opening drawers and messing with my bed sheets. I peered through one of the slits in the door, but I couldn't really see anything. That was until the creature put its disgusting, rotting face right up against the door. It was breathing so loudly that it was hurting my ears. I pushed myself back into a corner and used one of my jackets to cover me. It was my last option. I don't know how long I sat there, but it felt like an eternity. I eventually peeked out from behind my jacket to see some light coming through the doors. I stood up and looked out. It was daytime. I couldn't hear the creature anymore. I assumed that it got spooked by the sunlight and left. I slowly opened my closet door. It was finally safe. Needless to say, I got out of there, and I'm never going back. I don't want to see a therapist because they won't believe me. They'll think I'm insane. Maybe I am insane, I don't know. All I know is that whenever the locals of the Appalachian Mountains talk about these things, they aren't lying. Thanks a lot for watching this video till the end. Drop your suggestions in the comment section.